So today we are going to hear about rewriting the pages of your story with Michael and Pete. Michael and Pete, over to you. Thank you for joining us today.
All right, thank you very much. And Pete, it's glad to be working again with you. And we really appreciate joining Scrum Masters Universe, especially since today is Valentine's Day. Pete, I got you some candies. Ooh, it's going to be a little tricky. There we go. Some caramel-shaped hearts coming your way virtually, salted caramel. So just wanted to say, everybody, if you've got a significant other in your life, and who doesn't, whether it's a fur baby or some other kind of significant other, please make sure you spend some time sharing the love. And so with that, I'm going to share my screen.
And Michael, I got you some flowers.
Just what the doctor ordered. All right. And so as mentioned by Katiana, thank you again. And thanks to Jamie as well for the wonderful art that was shown there. That was some creation that she did on her own, and we really love the results of it. There is a popcorn machine in ours too, like the retrospective for the next one. We have a popcorn machine theme within our book, Shift from Product to People. But this is a part that we have the ideas in our book, but it isn't exactly explicitly stated in the book, and that's regarding rewriting the pages of your story with love. So we'll get right into it. And with that, first we're going to do a poll. So I'm going to put that on the screen here, and it's going to be over here. So the poll is going to be, as you can see there, if we could put that in the chat, I'm going to present.
Alrighty, put it in the chat.
Yeah, someone put it in the chat. I'm getting around to it, but I'm a little slow multitasking here.
It's already in the chat, so.
Good, thank you,
Good to
Pete.
go.
So if you would look at, how does your place of work respond to failure? Do you get discipline like an old poster I remember? Punishments will continue until morale improves. Or does your company like to be ostriches? Just put their heads in the sand and completely hide it. Is there a talk about that particular failure, but there's judgments, right? People start judging like, why did that happen? Who's at fault? What can we do about stopping this ever happening again? Right? Or it talks about it and everybody kind of just like vents a little, maybe in a retrospective, speaking of retrospectives, but then nothing changes. And finally, the failure is openly embraced with learning and ideas about what can be done. Why is things happening that way, and have psychological safety to go to a different place, right? Not stay stuck in the same place. So we're getting some feedback here. It looks like we're over the map, and it looks like talk about it with judgments is the most picked. We'll give another 30 seconds or so. Like to see these answers. I feel sorry for those that get disciplined. I feel almost as sorry for those that have to hide it. Look at that. Talk about it with judgments is dominating. All right, that's nearly half. Okay, now we got a little bit of a difference. Still, it's a good.
I have to say, it also kind of looks like the responses to the poll are giving us the middle finger.
That was unintended side effect, okay? Unintended. That's a failure in how I designed this particular poll EV. Thank you all for giving us the middle finger there and how we respond to failure. All right. All right, give another moment. I think we're good. I think we got a pretty good idea of how you feel about that. So with that, we're going to move on and go over the Agile doom loop, right? One of my favorite emojis is that person go, oh, right? This is the scream, and it's a well-known painting, and so I thought I would use that for this. And Peter are going to give you kind of a very dark story about how the Agile doom loop has happened for us, because certainly if you've been doing Agile for more than a little while, you've probably gotten into a doom loop before. So mine, I'm going to do one of my more recent ones. I've been doing Agile for a good, well, since 2002. I'll leave it that way. 20 plus years. And that is, I was doing some work in our US government. I've been doing a lot of work in our government for the past 5 years. And with that, they had some governance going on with one of their top agencies. I will not mention the name of the agencies. I'm going to protect the guilty here. And this is a real rough run for me because I'm one of those, like to call myself a golden retriever agile coach, meaning I can get along with everyone. Everyone can get along with me. I'm happy. I'm bouncy. I have another nickname of the Energizer Bunny because I keep going and going and going, bong, bong, bong. And so with this, they were doing something they called Agile Core Metrics. And they would take their big tier projects and programs, and they would measure them by certain measurements, which we called Agile Core Metrics. And the funny thing was that was introduced about, let's just say 5 years ago, roughly. And the very measurements themselves brought the opposite behaviors from those projects and programs because they were feeling like they were being audited and they considered it to be a waste of time, a monumental waste of time. They looked at any way to avoid, minimize, mitigate, reduce that as possible, to the point where it became super unpopular, even though it was mandated up high from leadership, right? Despite that, it had that stigma to it. And so I came in and I'm supposed to help update their overall guidelines they have, their overall current rules that they have for how to apply Agile. And one of them was to rewrite that. So I came in with a particular leader and we were doing the change and we came up with a new set of doing it, got it down to a very small amount, some things that were supposed to be easy draws, bring in more of the Agile mindset there. And it seemed to be going good. Then that particular leader I was working with left the government. And then it went to a different leader who had been doing this old McDonald's song of saying E-I-E-I-O, except they said A-I-A-I-O. We're doing everything AI. And so we're going to build our own little chat GPT in the government. And Agile, you know what? You need to reimagine Agile. As a matter of fact, we're not even going to do these core metrics things. We're just going to put that on the side. And it was disheartening. Everything just went to a grinding halt that didn't have the word AI in it. So I did get really good at AI, mind you. That's a side effect of this. But the bad part of it was that it was going nowhere with anything related to Agile thinking, Agile mindset, Agile delivery, all of that. And I quietly quit. First time in my career, I just quit. I just stopped trying, and that was really disheartening. And I did eventually exit out of there at the end of last year, but it's still something that I feel really bad on. So, Pete, what do you have?
Well, I'm going to mix together a few different stories and just tell a repeating occurrence that I keep running into, and maybe you all will recognize some similarities in paths or in your stories. I'm often brought into different organizations with the mandate of, hey, teach us Agile and help us figure out how to do this stuff. And so in the early days, it's going around and doing a worldwide tour of trainings, and usually they're like the 2 to 3 day trainings, maybe certified or not certified, and going back around. And then often people come back and say, follow up and like, hey, that training didn't work. Our teams aren't getting better. So if we were lucky to be able to, that they come back and talk to us about it, we're like, oh, hey, can we coach them? Like, can we come in and see what's going on and see what's happening in those spaces? Usually the answer that we get is no, that's a different contractor. And then a year later, they come back to us and say, all right, so we fired the other contractor. What can you guys do? And then we come back and we actually do the coaching. That's where we find out that they did a whole bunch of these customizations. And so we had to let them know that, like, hey, that thing that where you customized it, this is why you're not getting the results. And of course, the response is usually, well, that's what our organization is. That's the way we've always done things, or that's what our culture is like. We had to do that because of the way that we do business here. And so we just point out and say, like, that is the reason why you're not seeing the returns of what you're looking for. And so they finally break down and say, all right, well, we need to do something different. So go ahead, coach the teams, figure out what you can do, let us know how that's going. And then they go tell the coaches or the teams, and they say, coaches are here, they're here to help you, do whatever they tell you to do. So we go through, and if it goes great, we've been able to pull things together, and the stand-ups are efficient, and the sprint plannings are now realistically loaded up, and they're doing backlog refinements on a regular basis, and burn down charts are looking great, and team velocities are getting to be very predictable. And so they're doing all the things that are normally like the good agile things, and they come back and say, well, yeah, it's very predictable, but they're still building the wrong things. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, let's talk to your product leadership. Because usually we didn't have access to that. And I'm like, no, I mean, they don't want to be coached. All right, well, eventually then we figure out, and then bring in the coaching, and then we work that through, and they're like, all right, so we figure out a way to sort of switch around so that we're doing it, but then we're getting like the right features put through for what management is doing, but then the customers aren't buying. And then maybe if we're around for a little while longer, then they ask us, hey, can you come help us figure out what the customers want to get? At which point, we say, hey, well, let's go talk to your customers. And like, oh, we're not allowed to talk to customers. And really help them figure out that that's like core to what you really need to do. And that's why people aren't buying. And that's, and then most cases right about this time or a little bit before this time is when they say, well, the thing is, we ran out of money in our Agile budget. And so this has been a lot of the Agile doom loops that have been coming around, is that people in the leadership, as they're going through, they have an idea already at the beginning of what they should do and what we needed to accomplish. And so they just tell you that. I need training. Okay, we deliver the training. Oh, well, it's not the training that I want. I need coaching. Oh, okay, we deliver the coaching. Oh, it's not the coaching that I want. We need to figure out that we're building the right thing. We have to do customers. And they keep moving the goalpost. And so we had to come up with a different way to both talk amongst ourselves inside of the organization within the teams, as well as to talk with the leadership, to try to get on the right page as quickly as possible so we can start making these turnaround stories faster. And so we put together this process, and we started working on a few of these different things. And you can kind of recognize this in your own organizations if you start to see some of the triggers that are going to pop up. Mike, if you can skip to the next slide here. All right. So if people are focused very strongly on the solutions. Oh, sorry, Michael, this is your slide.
Yeah, okay. So I just wanted to say that with my story of quietly quitting, I did try, but the culture was not there to allow you to speak up. And you do get the beatings, by the way. I was in that side of it for this government entity that everybody was always quiet during meetings and only the leader talked. And then if anybody had brought anything, the leader said, oh, it's good, go ahead, talk. But then when you did, everybody judged you really bad and you would get punished. So it was pretty bad. So to do this, first off, you've got to really want it. You've got to really believe that you need to change something there, that there's a fire in your belly, and that you've failed before and you're just frustrated with it. You want to get out of this doom loop, right? You're just sick and tired of repeating like one of those Tom Cruise sci-fi movies that just goes over and over again. You got to keep trying. And you got to be ready to try something new, right? Because doing the same thing is just, you just have the same results. So that feeling is urgent. And here's the important part. You haven't gotten yourself to the point where you have no influence. If you've already cashed in all your chips and you got no influence at all left, you might already be stuck and you can't get out of it. Then it's just a matter of how long can you last, where you go. Because you need to have the support structure to be able to get that little spark going so that it can really start growing to something new. And that's what we're going to talk about with Pages. So over back to you, Pete.
All right, so we came up with a process of identifying what are the main components, and we put it into, we realized it kind of matched up with this acronym here. So PAGES. So problems, actions, goals, evidence, and story. And so we're going to walk you through the 5 components of these pages in order for you to know how to tackle each of these different things, why we think that they are critical to being able to break out of the doom loop, and how they can all come together to help you out. Go ahead, next slide. All right. So the first one is the problem. And this is, I think, one of the most important ones, and it's one of the reasons it's the first thing in the acronym. And I also believe it should be the very first thing that you do, is to identify what problems you want to leave behind. Oftentimes, and it was expressed in the story that I had before, that people come in with solutions. I want training, I want coaching, I need them to build this feature, I need this to get out the door. If we start with the solutions that we have already sort of pre-envisioned in our head, and we stop paying attention to the problems which launched those solutions in the first place, we can we can disconnect from the problem. We can have so many different, like we have great hypotheses about, oh, we got this problem that we want to solve. Oh, you know what we can do? We could do this. And then we jump on it. And then, 6 months later, a year later, 2 years later, we're still working on the solution, but we still have the same problem. If we lose sight of the problem, we'll never know when that problem is gone and when it disappears. So identifying what problem we want to go away before we get started on even picking the solution, to then see if that solution matches it, can make all the difference in the world. I had a great example of this with one of my teams where they came in and they wanted us to do really focus on velocity and predictability. Basically what they were telling us was that the teams, we can't trust anything they tell us. They tell us it's going to take this long. They tell us it's going to do this, and they're going to tell us they're going to get this piece done, and then it doesn't happen. We really need you to get the teams predictable. And through that process, we got them predictable, and we got them on those velocity charts, and we got them within like the recommended 80 to 120% range. And they're like, great, but they're still not getting the project done fast. They're like, oh, that's a completely different problem. If you want to get that product, the entire product done faster, we have to do other things like playing out the roadmaps. We have to do timelines. We have to map critical paths, and we have to make sure that they're working on the right things in the right order. That is what delivers a time to market kind of problem. If it's, I don't know what they're doing, or they're not being, they're working on the right things, but I can never predict when it comes, that is a velocity problem. But you have to be really clear on what problem you're trying to solve so that you don't pick the wrong solution.
So for actions, first we have our problems, and you want to prioritize those epic problems that are significant enough that impact you. And there's a whole deeper dive that we can go into on problems. Make sure you pick the right problems that Pete's just skimming over here. So then the problems, then you're going to have actions from those problems, right? And this is about having new ways of working. The old Einstein saying is that a definition of sanity is keep trying to do the same thing over and over again, right? And so we don't want to be insane about just trying the same thing thinking that's going to work. We've got to find a new way to work, right? By that way, we break out of old patterns. Atomic habits, anyone, right? You can start small, but you got to really look for the big ones that are going to break you out, like a breakout. And so look outside yourself. I mean, with all the different resources that are out there these days, there's always a new way to do things. You have not tried it all. So find something that works with the wisdom of the crowd, those that you talk with that are supportive of this, and figure out something new that's going to do it. Now, you could do it yourself and start with yourself. That is perfectly fine. But it's got to be brand new, and do it the way they do it. Don't try to make it your own first, right? Shuhari. And Shuhari is that old thing where you start with monkey see, monkey do. Then once you get a little bit going, you understand it better, you can start maybe doing some changes to it and then create your own. But start with shoes. Start with the idea of you're just going to copy what they do. Do it that way. It's been proven in other places. It may not work exactly the same here, but start with it that way. Those are the actions you want to do. And customizing, it's just going to end up messing it up. You won't be sure if it's what customization you did or the actual thing that you picked up was causing the problem. And so that comes to the Ratatouille principle. This is something Pete's coined from, yes, the movie Ratatouille, the Pixar film. That's why you see the Ratatouille character there. And it's a modification, right? Not everybody can be, not everybody's a great cook, but a great cook can be anyone. This is a variation on with ideas. Not every idea can be a great idea, but a great idea can come from anywhere, right? It doesn't matter who brings it up. There's no pride of ownership here. Doesn't have to come from Pete or me or whoever. Whoever comes up with the idea, you got to embrace it. That sounds like a great idea. That sounds like it's going to hit that problem that we've identified. Let's go with it. That's what Ratatouille is all about, is coming up and letting ideas flow no matter from where. Flamin' hot Cheetos. All right, Pete.
Yeah, and I'm going to go back a little bit on the action to really clarify on a bit there, which is that the newness is very important. This isn't like, oh, we're not very good at burn down charts, so we should spend some more time on burn down charts. Or this other team here is really good at this thing, so let's try and adopt what they do. That can be good, but they're also part of your culture. If you really want to change your culture, look for an action that is outside of your organization, that is aimed at the same problem, and pick that one so that you really have to do things differently than you're used to doing. It's going to make all the difference in the world. All right, let's go over to goal. So let's talk about the goal part here. This is often one of the easier ones. So people tend to do this more often than other things. I would say most every change has an action to it. The second most common thing that I see is an action with a goal of what you want to do. And then the other stuff comes in a distant third from the rest of the acronym, the program, the evidence, and the stories that we're going to get to in just a minute. So goals, you've probably heard a lot about this, and goals can be very good and effective in this way. They give you, basically want you to envision what the future is going to be like. How will you know when you have gotten there? How will you be able to look around and recognize? If you think about where that is or what that looks like first, then you're going to have more opportunities for being able to figure out if you were on the right track or if you're not on the right track. And there's an extra technique I layer in on top of this one, which is about working backwards from the future. So one of the things that we do that a lot in teams that I have that are the most successful is they go to this place where they are imagining themselves coming back from the future, or they look into where do they want to be, and then they kind of map in a backwards direction and say, all right, so to get to this spot in the future, what do we need to do in the step before that? All right, well, eventually we're going to need to do this kind of thing. All right, so what do you need to do from there? Well, we'd have to do this part here and that part here and get to that point. And as you start building a picture and a schedule and a plan backwards from the end results, you'll actually come up with a very different approach and plan than if you build from the front going forwards to get to that goal. So how you approach the goal and really knowing what that goal looks like and working backwards in time is actually going to give you much better results in how you're planning it out. So being cognizant about that goal and being cognizant about its effect and how you will recognize it will make all the difference in the world. So the next thing that we want to talk about is this idea of evidence. We used to go in and talk a lot about metrics. Used to go in and get teams to kind of work on it, but a lot of times teams do not have access to the data collection. They maybe aren't using some of the platforms that they need. They maybe don't have the ability to collect the data that they actually need to be able to build and make really good metrics. And so at some point I shifted out of metrics to evidence and just say, all right, well, how do you know that you are on the right track? And even before we get started, how might we know that how should we plan out to collect this data? That was the other problem that people ran into when it came to metrics, was that as they would try to collect the metrics after the work was done, they realized that they had missed some data that they would need in order to be able to actually do the calculations of the metrics. And then it was too late, couldn't go back and do it. And so maybe they started collecting some other stuff going forward, but it got harder and harder to do that. But if you think about, I want to leave this problem behind, and I want to get to this goal by taking this action, PAG steps inside of that, how will I know that the problem is disappearing? And how will I know that the goal is coming closer and that we are actually getting to that spot? And you can collect that evidence. It doesn't have to be on a daily basis. Maybe it could be on a weekly basis or on a sprint basis. But knowing how you're going to know when you disappear from that problem can make all the difference. And that's the little trick that I want to add in on top of this, which is that the best metrics that you can collect are metrics about the problem, not about the solution. A lot of the vanity metrics that we collect are actually metrics measured around implementing our solution. Oh, we want to have this many features. We want to have this many clicks. We want to have this many customers signing in on this on a daily basis. But that may have zero correlation with the problem that you're trying to actually solve. So definitely would recommend that you get that clarity on the problem that you want to solve, and then design your evidence around the problem. And how can we see that problem slowly disappearing and going away? And you'll have much better solutions, you'll have much better outcomes, and you will have much better choices in the actions that you choose and the things that you implement. I'm going to take a pause here because I saw Michael's name pop up. Michael, are you back?
I am back. Can you hear me?
Yes, we got you.
All right. Yeah. I mean, my computer just like dead in the water. I don't know what's going on with it. I'm on my backup computer, but it looks like you're chugging along. And feel free to keep going unless it's my turn.
Yep. Well, I already took your turn here, so we'll keep going here.
The story. Yeah. Okay. So sorry about that, everyone. Of course, when Murphy, I'm part Irish, so Murphy's Law always seems to happen to me sometime or another in a typical day. And so the wrongness did happen. With story, I'm a storyteller. If you haven't noticed yet, I have my own bag of stories, which looks like Santa Claus bag, meaning that it's got so many stories in there that I can share. And when we're going through this, right, if you go through pages, right, we got the problems, we're determining the actions from there. We have our goal, our vision very clear from that. And then we've got to build the evidence there. So that way we have our forcing functions of direction that we can say we know we're going to be hitting and solving our problem, that it goes away. And how do we know that? Well, you want to talk about that. You want to have a story of what you're doing and when it's done too. But really, it's important to make sure you're always repeating this to whoever will listen that's involved, any stakeholders. Even if you don't post it anywhere or send it to anyone, do it for yourself. Have it there to motivate yourself. I'm the type where I'm very expressive about this, and I will tell everyone about the journey, the good, the bad, and the ugly, all right, that we're getting away from this problem. This is our seismic shift towards that new goal, that new vision, and include all the things, because we're dealing with change. It's like the Satter curve where you have a changing element, boom, things are going to get all messy and ugly. People aren't going to be too happy with that. And then it's going to slowly improve if it's going the right direction. And what lessons can you learn about that, right? What are the successes and the failures from that? Because our failures will lead to successes. And so what you're not doing, this is the hardest one for me to let go, by the way. Determining what not to do is so important. Let go of things. Allow the time and space to get to that new place by removing stuff wherever you can find it. And whatever is the lowest value of things you do right now. It might be as simple as stop looking at your TikTok so often, but it might be as complex as some team activities doing right now that you just need to reduce to get this in that place. So the is very important to have, and just keep bringing up that story over and over again.
You can go in any order when you're building your pages. So you can start with a goal that you want, but then ask yourself, what problem does this goal, like what are we leaving behind to head to this place? You can start with an action. You know, you may have something that you want to do already, or something that's been mandated. I got a perfect example of this that went into a story about the automated testing, the DevOps automated testing dive-in. And it was a great example of a failure that turned into a win. And we started with, like, we were being dictated, you have to have 100% code coverage. So we said, all right, we're going to wrap a pages thing around this. So the action that we have been mandated to do is to do 100% code coverage. So we say, what kind of problem are we trying to leave behind when it comes to, we don't want to see any problems escaping into the wild and for customers to deal with. And so we did the work of doing all that kind of stuff. And we found out that we ended up spending a whole lot of time. The evidence that we collected was that the time invested, like the number of errors went down drastically, but the time invested was really, really difficult. So we ran another experiment after that to say, how could we tackle two of these problems at the same time? And get things going faster, but without more bugs escaping. And we started looking at things like acceptance testing tests, that a lot of the unit tests were also being caught by the acceptance tests. And then there was API tests. There was the tests between the different servers, between the different objects inside of the code. And a lot of the errors in the unit tests were also being cut by those things. So we just very secretly went in and stopped maintaining a bunch of the unit tests that already had coverage. And we turned it into what we call the DevOps testing diamond, where we trimmed off a bunch of the extra work and we got super fast without losing any of our error rates, like the reduction in our error rates we went through. And had we not thought about that, we would have gotten into a couple different issues and we would have been super slow and we would not have been able to accomplish what we were able to accomplish. You can start with a vision of what you want to accomplish, and this is the story writing first. You could say, this is our dream of, this is what we want to accomplish, and start with the S, and then work backwards from that and say, well, what would need to happen? What would we need to see for that story to become true? And collect, write down your evidence plan, and then say, all right, well, how would we define that? Or, that would give us this kind of a goal that we're trying to achieve. And so we're trying to accomplish, for our case, speed as well as low error rates. To do that, we're going to take this action, and if we're successful, we'll see all this problem get behind. So just think about doing all the different pieces, but don't worry about doing all the pieces in the same order. There's one other thing that I want to put in here that actually I think I skipped when you dropped, because I was like, where'd Michael go? Oh no. But the thing is, problems. And I didn't say this before, but you're going to have multiple problems that you may need to solve. And when you're talking about those problems, put multiple problems on the board, but then prioritize them and put them in order. And one of the adages and rules that I use with my teams is that once we put those problems in order, you cannot make a higher order problem worse when trying to solve a lower order problem. Because what often happens is we solve one problem, we get that going great, then we move on to the next problem, and it kind of affects the first problem, and then we solve the third problem, and that completely undoes the work that we did for the first two problems. And then by the time we get through doing all of these things and focusing on solving all of these different problems, we have to go back around and resolve the first problem again, and then the second, and the third. So just collect all of your problems, put them in a single prioritized backlog of problems, and put them in order. So it's very clear of which problems you should not make worse in trying to solve other different problems. And so that gets you to this thing here of you're going to want to run multiple experiments at the same time. And so this is where we call a sort of like a multiple pages kind of experiment. And once you start doing multiple pages in this acronym at the same time, you will the variables will start to leak over. And the one thing that you're doing to improve this one is going to affect that experiment. And the thing over here that you change for this experiment is going to affect that one. And there's a lot of things that are interdependent on each other. So if you can, I actually would recommend focusing on one page at a time. Run an experiment, figure it out, focus all of your attention on just this one thing until you collect enough evidence to say, yeah, I think we're on the right spots or on the right direction. Then start your next page and go through the steps, and then pay attention to, is this new page affecting the previous page? And then write that into your story, and then go write your third page and work on that experiment while paying attention to how it affects the previous 2 pages. And so it's a lot easier to think about adding one new variable as you go along than it is to try to run 3 or 4 different experiments at the same time and not knowing which one actually gave you the benefit or the increase of speed, which one actually did not. And the reason it slowed down was not because of page number 3, it was actually because of page number 4, but we weren't paying attention to how page number 4 affected page number 3.
All right, so I like to affectionately call this trick shots with pages. Some of the things you can do, there's a lot of different ones you could come up yourself to. Keep to the core of it. But one thing is the 5-minute retro, which I call return on time investment. I did get that from a couple of colleagues I worked with that used to work at Rocket companies, Rocket Mortgage and all that. And at the end of any key meeting that we're talking about the progression of pages, we look at, well, was this valuable? Was the meeting itself valuable? How are we doing with that? Are we progressing the problem in the right way? Are new problems coming up, like Pete mentioned, that could be higher level that we're actually impacting in a negative way? What are we doing to make sure we're looking at it from a systems thinking perspective, that we are hitting that top single problem and we're getting rid of that problem without introducing new problems that could be even worse? So that's one thing. And the other is a top 3 problem tracker. Have your problem statements for your top 3, pick one of them, have the evidence ready, and as you go through those, you might end up having it where you'll evolve your ranking because things will change over time. We live in a dynamic world. So always keep at least your top 3 ready to go and known. If somebody comes up to you and say, what's the top 3 problems you're tackling right now? Well, we're on this one, but here's our top 3 that we know about. Right? And so that's always nice to say in any situation, the leadership or whoever, make sure you got alignment with them. And then finally, as I was mentioning, story collections. Have your set of stories, have great stories, start building up your stories. I keep a list on a OneNote page of all the stories by company names and situations and years and all that, so that I can bring up anything that was a good, bad, ugly, whatever comes up to that particular situation that makes the most sense. It's great to have those to inspire, either to, hey, be careful, cautionary tale here, or that really sounds great. It was a big success over here as well. So it looks like we're heading the right direction.
And I've seen a few different variations in this with organizations that I've worked with. I try to get them all to collect, like Michael does, stories for themselves. What worked, what didn't, so we can influence it and do that kind of. And then also share the failure and the success stories amongst the other teams. So if you have chapter leads or you have departments, and you can all get together, like all the engineers, and share some stories back together, back and forth. All the Scrum Masters, and share some stories back and forth. All the product owners, and share some stories that you had that had some impacts and things that didn't go well. Because if you can stop some other team inside of your organization from making the same mistakes that you did, that's a huge win for all of us. And then we also would have communities of practice where we could invite in leadership. And I always wanted them to share the negative stories at the community of practice with the leadership. Not all the teams wanted to do that. They more preferred to share the success stories through it. But what's important is that you're at least sharing the failure stories amongst yourselves. But communities of practice is a great place to pull up a page and do a nice little presentation. And if the teams are tracking it with their evidence and the listings, all that kind of stuff, they've already got all the content that they need to really be able to deliver a great internal presentation within your organization to all the other different teams that are part of your groups. All right, so this is another little acronym just to sort of re-cement this in your brains a little bit. So this is PAGES, but if you do PAGES without a problem, you will just be focused on the wrong things. And as I like to say, but Michael doesn't let me put this into the acronym, it's going to age you. It's just going to make things so much worse if you don't track your problem while you are working on your pages. If you are missing the A step out of it, if you don't have the action, I mean, then really you have nothing. Like if you're not making a change in what you're actually doing, you're just thinking about the problem and the goal, but you haven't actually changed a single thing that you're doing inside of your team, then of course you're not going anywhere. You're not making any changes, and that should be fairly evident. If you try to do pages without the goal of what you're trying to do, you might know the problem that you're doing, but then your teams will be scattered and probably going all over the place, or they might be working against each other. If you don't have that shared common goal that's keeping you all pointed in the same direction, you will find that you end up having a lot of wasted time. And if you don't collect the evidence, if you miss that E inside of there, you're not going to really know that you left that problem behind. And you may not even know whether or not you're closer enough to your goal. You will miss something if you don't collect the evidence, and you will assume that certain things have happened when they haven't actually. And then the story allows you to take a page and turn it into something that's memorable. It's just a story in an article, it very quickly gets lost. But once you can put all of these pages together, you can start to tell a transformation story to your leadership and say, look what we did. We did this and we got better here and they improved over here and we started doing this and we had this impact. It's all of those pages together which tell your rewriting story. So pages, P-A-G-E-S. So this is all part of our book. So Shift from Product to People. If you want to check that out and find out more about it. We don't actually call it pages. We didn't come up with the acronym until after the book had been published. But we realized that this is exactly what we were doing inside of this. And so it's kind of in three parts. The first part of the book is all the problems where you can sort of experience what the team is going through before they get help. The middle period is when they get some coaching, they start to work on things. And then there's some kerfuffle inside of there, I won't say anything more, which leads them to really adopting a brand new way of thinking, and that's part 3, and that's where you'll find a lot of the content having to do with pages and the stuff we talk about in here. And I guess I should also say, because I forgot to mention it before, but we wrote our book as a novel. So it's kind of like the Phoenix Project, the goal, and those sorts of things, because we found that it was easier to tell the story of how an organization can make a transition than it is for us to just lay out the different techniques that happen. And that really was the launch of it. Like, we were coaching a bunch of these things, but it wasn't until we really nailed down the story that we were able to make changes within our organization. And so that got us to writing the book as a story. And so now that brings us here today to share with you all about how you can rewrite your stories.
All right. So with that, we've come to the end of our presentation, and I see some questions in there. Katiana, I would expect you're going to be fielding that for us. I do want to mention real quick too that as you can probably see up here, there is an event happening in person in Tallinn, Estonia, and that is coming up in May 18th through 20th. We'll be presenting there. And so we're really looking forward to that. We're also track chairs for the Agile Business Track. So if anybody's interested in that, or even coming or submitting a topic, topics are available to be submitted until March 18th. I've just put the link in the chat. And I would like people also to give their return on time investment for this as well. So if everyone, I know questions will be asked, and that might help a bit more, but if you put a number between 1 and 5, 1 means total waste of time, like a fist of 5. Those are familiar with fist of 5, you know what I'm talking about. 2 means that it was not so great. 3 means it was pretty good. 4 means it was good. And then 5 means it was the best ever. So I'm going to put that in the chat. Just put numbers 1 through 5. We won't take it personally. This is something that we really do want to get your feedback, and bad feedback is valuable too.
It's part of the evidence.
That's
which
right.
I see is the question here of, could you provide a few more examples of evidence compared to typical metrics?
So if somebody everyone just take like 1 minute, put a number from 1 to 5, 1 the lowest, 5 the highest in the chat. All right. I'm seeing a trend.
Seeing a lot of 4s. People are not wanting to rock the boat.
There's got to be somebody in here. Probably already left. That's the thing. They're gone.
Yeah, I think all the 4s probably mean that it was great. There's probably somewhere for improvement, like, hey, why didn't you think about pages before you wrote the book? Or are you going to come out with, a sequel to it? Are you going to rewrite it?
We are writing a second book, and we have plans for a third book as well. So it's going to be a trilogy, nowhere near as good as Lord of the Rings, but we'll try.
Yeah, we were doing a bunch of we were writing out the book that we wanted to write, and we gave it to the editor, and he's like, I can't publish this. This thing is way too large. So we ended up having to chop it in half. And so this book that's out is the first half of the story that we originally wrote, and we still have a lot of the content for the second story, and so that'll be the foundation for book number 2. So,
well, great. Then you're going to have to come back and tell us all about the next book then.
Be happy to. All right, so there's a question here about evidence compared to metrics. I'm trying to think of a good example on this for evidence compared to metrics. Where it started for me a lot was when we just could not collect metrics. We didn't have access. Like, we wanted to know, did customers like the feature? Did they want to use the feature? But there was nothing in the software where that was tracking checks or asked them to give feedback or reviews or any information on that kind of stuff. And so we had no data to go on. And for some of these teams, for example, they didn't have, like, that was a whole other departments. And so they weren't allowed to talk to the customers. It's in one of those types of situations. So we started looking at, like, well, what is some other evidence that we might see which would give us the same information that we do have access to? And so thinking about, well, if they really liked the way it worked, then maybe they'd be coming back more frequently, or maybe they'd spend more time in the application. Maybe we'd see and then we could track how long people log in. They log in at the start, and we know when the end of the session is. And so we learned to start to designing some evidence or some metrics based on evidence that would lead us to believe that those things might happen. And then I actually had one case that was in this category. And what we found out was that people came back to the site frequently, but they didn't spend very much time. And so people were like, oh, we got our bad retention metrics, or we're losing, customers and stuff. And so, but we got a chance to go out and talk to people. And what we found out was like, oh man, you guys just like really sped up the whole process. So now I come in and I can do my job in like a couple minutes, whereas it used to take me 10 minutes. And so what we found out is they were coming back more frequently, and they were using the application more frequently, and they were happier about the application, but we had fixed some of their problems, which resulted in low retention metrics because they were going to jump out very fast, but that was a good thing. And so knowing what makes people happy helped us decide what was the right metric that we didn't have when we started.
And it looks like Karen has a follow-up question. Is that okay, Pete?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, go for it, Karen.
Maybe you're on mute.
Heard you for a moment.
Oh, okay. All right. So, Pete, you said that eventually you spoke to customers. So if you hadn't gotten that, you would have been going on an assumption.
Mhm.
So did you eventually say, we really need that direct customer feedback? Because if you don't have the direct customer feedback, you're kind of, you probably, would have misinterpreted the
Yep.
fact that, oh, they don't like us because they're not spending time with us. versus, hey, they really like me, because, it's better.
Yeah. Yeah, and we use the pages concept to be able to ask for that time. Because we had two experiments that happened in this case at the same time that had different results. So one was the amount of time people were spending on the system kept going down. They were coming back a little bit more frequently. I was already talking about that. We were mapping that kind of thing. And so the response was like, oh, that's not great. We're not doing so well. But revenues were up. And there was a disconnect between those stories. And so by being able to pull that in and say, all right, so we made this change, and yes, the retention numbers are down, but the revenues are up, and we don't know why, but here's the pages of our story, and we need to make sense of this story. And the only way to make sense of this story is to talk to customers. I think we should go out and talk to some customers. And it helped us to make a case based upon data to leadership that resulted in the action that we wanted. And so we were lifted from the embargo of teams talking to customers so that we actually get the information. And I've been able to spin that off in a couple other different places by pulling the data and showing that we have something to back up our argument, but there's a big question mark. I get permission to do the thing that nobody's ever gotten to do before.
Hoorah. Okay, it takes time.
Yeah.
It's not like a fast fix, but it's a fix.
Yes.
You win.
Yes. And that's why we called it breaking out of the doom loop.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
And we are coming up on time. So Pete and Michael, any last things you would like to share with us today?
I would say thank you so much for having us here. We definitely have enjoyed talking about this stuff, and we want more people to be able to be exposed to the successes that we've had. Each of these pages is going to give you the ability to get the things that you haven't been getting yet. But if you don't collect all 5 aspects of this, leadership's not going to listen to you. Michael.
I just say that Pages is deceptively simple. It's 5 letters. It's an acronym, and getting through the nuances is you're going to have to practice it. It does take some practice to get used to it, and we are evolving it ourselves with how we are using Pages and how we can make it more effective too. And so keep that in mind. We're happy to share the presentation with anyone. LinkedIn, both Pete and I are available anytime to continue conversations. And we are looking at ways to do this no matter what the context may be, right? You just got to find that little spark somewhere, right? And then make it grow from there, and Pages can really expand from that point.
Yeah. I'll add, if you do connect with us on LinkedIn, send us a message and let us know you heard about it here, because we get so much spam.
True.
Well, wonderful. Pete, Michael, thank you so much. It's been really wonderful having you here with us today. Everyone, thank you for joining us. The session was recorded, and so we'll get it out within a couple days. So thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.